Well, hello people, and welcome back to episode 4 of Project Skylines. I hope you're having a wonderful day. We are building Knox Country for the game Project Zomboid in Cities 2. On last episode, the wider Riverside district joined the current project. In this episode, we're diving into the massive town of Brandenburg that lies in the very western edge of the map. There's a national connection here, and indeed our first train yard so we can see some vehicles moving around the map. Lots of fun, and another massive build. Let's get stuck into it, shall we? So opening up the biggest tile space yet, this is certainly the largest of the 5 builds we've done so far. And you can see a bit of a size comparison here as well against the wider Riverside district that went in last episode. A much bigger area to cover. But we'll get started as always with a classic, Project Skylines Road time-lapse. And if you aren't subscribed yet, don't forget YouTube will not release my family until I get this to a 70-30% subscribe ratio. So please help and hit that subscribe button so I can see my family again. On the road leading out of Brandenburg down towards Ekron, it kind of splits into a couplet highway system. They are 2 lanes here, but they're too wide for the scale we have to play with, so we're just going to drop down to a parallel mode with the one-way road before this road merges back into a single carriageway. And also adding some slip lanes that are present on the main road. And some of the country roads holding the fields. Which leaves us with a mostly complete road frame with only some small ones missing. Heading into the first section, I wanted to tackle the little strip mall that lies just off of the main road, use the ploppable car park for this, and then fuse together some southwest commercial buildings, which actually work really nicely for that kind of strip mall purpose. They're really nice assets, pretty much all of them from the southwest part really. Then we have another self-storage yard. There's plenty of these to come across in Knox Country. Just a couple of ploppable warehouses with an industry building and a commercial building here as well. With the fence work, that boxes all of this in. There's also more generic commercial configurations around here, small single-story buildings with plenty of car parking around them. And there's also a construction site here, but I lack the materials to make kind of half-built buildings in CS2. So instead, I thought we'd add some props here a little bit later to kind of indicate the beginnings of a construction site. It's not actually started yet, but it's about to. Brandenburg in build 42 also has an enormous tornado that's ran through it, destroying many of the homes, leaving them as just destroyed shells, basically. I can't build this in CS2 since there's no destroyed home assets, and I can't think of a way to make destroyed homes. If you have an idea, I'm happy to come back through Brandenburg and add the destroyed homes, but I couldn't figure out a way to do them, so we're building Brandenburg pre-Twister, if you like. This also means we get to place our first functioning rail station today, so we'll have some fun with that a little bit later in the episode. There's also a field present in the middle of town surrounded by all of this kind of larger shopping commercial centres. And then begun to place in some services present here, including a school and a fire station that make up this kind of main road through Brandenburg. We also have a bit of row homes here, which turns out to be one of my favourite bits of the town actually. Using some of the northeast row homes with some behind house car parking. Actually makes a really nice residential design. Another testament to how great Project Zomboid actually is for City Skylines inspiration. Just the way buildings sit against car parks and frontage roads. Great fun to build. As challenging as this project can be sometimes, it is an amazing amount of fun to go for another video game map recreation. There's also a baseball pitch present here. There is some really nice baseball decals you can get on Paradox mods, but they're all too big for the scale I'm playing with here, so I'm just relying on some dirt and sand surfaces to sketch out the general well-trodden shape of the field, alongside with some sheds and gravel parking that's also near here. Slightly redrawing the shape of the road here, we also correct that little off-center divot with Move It in a second. With further services going in, we have a church over here, of course, in the form of a fire station, a police station, and my current build 42 base. I actually have a few months survived in Brandenburg in my current run. I'm at the hardware store on the main street, which I thoroughly recommend as a base. It's fully fenced in, has loads of room for cars, an outdoor storage building, and a little upstairs, which is perfect for resting and recuperating. Highly recommend this base in Brandenburg if you're playing Zomboid, alongside watching this series. You also get the surface slightly wrong here as well, and because this is a more kind of old wooden building, I decided to go with a barn to actually replicate this shop, and then boxed it in with all the fencing around it. Then the last of the buildings in this area, which includes quite a mix. We've got a post office, just a single home, some mixed use, and a regular office building. Also beginning to add in the houses around the main street here. There's a really nice pattern of kind of the path touching up to the road above. Not quite a cul-de-sac, they're basically just circular end roads, but with some repeated housing here, and kind of definitely a more distinct development from the rest of the housing styles in Brandenburg. Turning our attention to the waterfront, we start to add in some pathways that link people essentially all the way down to Riverside from here. And then also preparing some connections for the old people's home that also lies in this bit of the town. I do actually end up placing these buildings in the wrong spot, we'll move them over in a second. And then we'll come on to talk about the ship that's in Brandenburg. It is kind of an old steamer in Zomboid, but there's no old steamer assets in CS2. Maybe something will come with bridges and ports, that's a little more appropriate. But because I don't have the asset here in Project Skylines, instead we're just going to use one of the regular cruise ships. It was either this or an oil tanker, so I thought this was the more appropriate choice. And also using one of the new wooden piers to sketch out exactly that, kind of a little boarding pier to get onto the boat. It might be a bit modern for the 90s, but it at least gives us the visual. And then continuing to decorate this park with fountains and car parking that can also be found here. With some more of the housing going in. We nearly double our population this episode. There's certainly a lot more people living in Brandenburg, I think we finish close enough to 4,000 come the end of the episode. Building the little warehouse out here, which is kind of a little car repair shop next to a farm on definitely some private property. This little place has a fence around it and some surface work just connecting the buildings. Now turning our attention to the community centre, which was definitely one of the more challenging bits of Brandenburg. Ended up going with the Chinese kindergarten and one of the Eastern European high schools to curate this place. A little bit more modern and perhaps extravagant than we find in Project Zomboid, but for the size and scale and service these things will provide, I was happy to go with them. Continuing with some path detailing, there's also some tennis courts and a running track out the back of the community centre, so use pathways and surfaces to replicate all of this. And don't forget, if you have reached this point in the video, don't forget to leave me that zombie emoji down in the comments below. Now we turn our attention towards the graveyard here. I tried a few of the ploppable graveyards, but none of them were really working, so ended up going with a custom design instead. Pathways and the vanilla tombstones serving the job absolutely perfectly, with some extra fence lanes and trees to tie together. A really nice and pretty simple graveyard design that you can add to your cities as well. We do place down one of the static ploppable cemetery assets here, but I end up changing this out for another church later on. Again, using the Better Bordeaux's fire station with the steeple asset. It's kind of the perfect church every time, really. There's also a little maintenance area here with a shed and some fencing alongside some commercial and another gas station that sits on the main road just next to the trailer park. I'm not going to build the military checkpoint in Brandenburg, since in this version of Knox Country it's still just an open highway road heading over the river. But I think when we come to the major military installations around Louisville, for example, the military checkpoint on the main road, we will leave indication, perhaps a pile of crates and some stretches of net lane fencing, just to kind of indicate maybe the fact that the military is beginning to prepare to lock down the city, but currently all the highways and roads are still functional pre-infection. Finishing off the trailer park with some surfaces and props we see here. Simple dumpsters to tie together a nice little trailer park build. With the middle of Brandenburg coming together, it was time to connect the highway from Riverside over here, alongside another little mini residential plopping time-lapse. Brandenburg also has a prison. We used pretty much the same configuration we did for the Rosewood one, since they're very similar buildings. A base game police station with some medical clinic sub-buildings fused together to create the prison wings at the back of the station. Better bulldozer to tidy up some hedges to replace with chain link fencing, alongside some texture work to indicate a little entrance gate that sits on the right hand side of the prison. And with that in, Brandenburg is starting to look like Brandenburg. Wanted to take a break from the town for a little bit, so returned to some countryside. Where we're finally starting to see some huge fields, so this is a great opportunity to use the functioning base game industry. So we can see tractors moving around these fenced, ploughed fields, adds a lot more life into the countryside. There's also a massive house out here as well, which is a perfect excuse to use one of the unique residential buildings from CS2. These are essentially little mini housing kind of country estates within themselves. So they settle quite nicely, and a nice way to use these sorts of assets as well, tucked in and around your farmland. More great inspiration. Alongside lots of other regular farms, surfaces and plopped houses to make up lots of different shapes and sizes that makes up the countryside on the very western edge of Knox Country. Brandenburg also has a little airstrip, and a huge shout out to Sully for his Airports Essentials pack. Honestly, I kind of totally overlooked this thing when I was thinking about building Brandenburg. I hadn't factored in the airstrip at all. But some surfaces and the net lanes that come with Sully's pack helped create a real, effective, small country airstrip. You also end up placing a jet engine prop here. It might be a little big for this runway, but there are, as of yet, no prop plane props, if you like. So the small private jet will have to do for Brandenburg's airfield. Some oil storage made the perfect hangar. And then a small office building to make up the airfield administration. Using those net lanes again to sketch out the numbers that we see on the edge of the runways. I'd love to know from the aviation police if these are correct in Project Zomboid, since they're taken directly from the game. Are they actually sensical? Let us know down in the comments. Then time for the surfaces at the back of the prison, before we turn our attention to more Project Surface. We then build up the little bar that's present on the very edge of Brandenburg by the lake, using a small commercial shop, some car parking and a gazebo to develop the green belt around it. For the water, I didn't really want to start playing with the water surfaces tool since CS2 water is janky as hell, and since it's such a flat map, it'll be a nightmare to get it to clear. So we end up using some of the water surfaces, which is a really nice set of surfaces with loads of different water textures on them, and they do actually quite a convincing job. So definitely check them out if you're looking to do water via surface instead of actual water. Hopefully that's going to get reworked one day. And then a pier and a bit of riverbed thin to finish it all off gives us a really nice, convincing kind of small town country pond with fence in to tie it all together. With plenty more UK, northeast and southwest housing going in, to make up the bulk of the suburbia for Brandenburg. We're now moving into the bit of Brandenburg that in the game has been destroyed by a twister. There's also a rail yard out here as well, which in the game has been destroyed by the twister, but we're going to use Tiggan's amazing rail infrastructure pack to use one of the medium train depots from this pack. The base game depot is enormous and is probably better suited to the one in Mordra, so the medium one fits this space in the overlay pretty much perfectly. Lots of car parking and a few supporting industrial buildings around the edge of the rail station. With a slightly expanded rail infrastructure, there's only one rail passing through in Brandenburg, but of course I need to connect all of these lines in CS2. Country roads also heading down to Akron. With the rail yard down, I wanted to set up an intercity line so a train would pass through Knox Country, which is something we never see in Project Zomboid, and I have to say I enjoyed this quite a bit, seeing passenger and freight trains move around the map for the very first time in any version of Knox Country. Adding in some tree lines to help tie the fields together. And the last of the commercial buildings that sit around the main street. It was at this point I also noticed that the main road through Brandenburg is actually a 4-lane divided road, so ended up downgrading the highway to this type instead. Great use of road hierarchy, has to be said, by the Zomboid devs. And then we return to the last of what is in the game destroyed housing, but for here we're going for a mix of still functioning, still standing residentials that would have been here pre-Twister Knox Country. There's also a few more ponds and general kind of rough, trodden agricultural land out here, so sketching in as many surfaces as we can to help create these aesthetics. Turning our attentions now towards the farm spaces that lie between here and Riverside. This space is much bigger than I remember it being when I came to build it. It does actually stretch for quite a long way down the Riverside, if you'll excuse the pun, and also through in the trailer park that's on the very edge of Brandenburg. Turn to town to throw in some more fences and details. Before then adding in the emergency shelter that's actually present here in Brandenburg. Just by the high school, there's a little underground bunker. So we fused 2 of the emergency shelters together just to give it the same width that we find in the game. Then it was time to build the old people's home, which I left to the very end. This was quite a challenging build, ended up using static ploppable commercial motels to create a bit of a old people's home complex, which is complete with surfaces, fencing, custom car parking. Again, just a really nice, interesting way to repurpose commercial assets into like an old people's home by the river. Even though these builds are very stylized from Project Zomboid, of course, I hope you are managing to walk away with some inspiration for this for building in other cities away from Project Skylines. I most certainly am. I'm a big fan of how the old people's home turned out. With the old folks' home, it was time to get the last of the country roads, farmsteads and fields that lay between here and Riverside. Nothing we haven't seen before here, just the usual farmsteads, tiny fields, barns, etc. A lot of Knox Country's countryside is fairly well translated across most of the map. There's also a little gas station just off the highway before Brandenburg. Used a couple of smaller European assets, which is such a simple yet effective combination to make a rural gas station off the side of the highway. Adding in the roads around what in the Zomboid map here is an abandoned sanatorium. However, the map does need garbage service, so I took this opportunity to place the vanilla recycling centre, which fits pretty much perfectly. Also added one of the upgrades, and then across the highway from here there's a whole bunch of workers housing, which the usual 2x2, 3x3 selection of assets does a nice job. And there is an abandoned factory here in Zomboid, but as I can have it functioning here, we're just going to have the old factory just off of the sanatorium and the highway using one of the vanilla assets. And with that in, the overlays on between Riverside and Brandenburg are starting to look very busy indeed now. And that will do it for the Brandenburg episode, everyone. Let's thank you all so much for watching. This episode took a long time to produce, so if you have enjoyed it, those likes and comments down below really do help the channel to grow. Super challenging build, Brandenburg. A huge shout out to the YouTube members and patrons that support these videos, with a roll call to our Golden Egg patrons: Bad Wolf, Blythe, Casino, Great C, Jamin, Louis Adlam, Michael W, Phoenix MD, and Spartan Angel. If you want to get involved in this podcast and early access over on the Patreon, I'll see you next episode for when we start heading down towards Irvington and Ekron, and I think after that we'll be going down to Muldra and West Point in the eventual approach up to Louisville, which should be a lot of fun, we think. Otherwise, enjoy the cinematics, and I thank you all so much for watching, and as always, enjoy the rest of your day.